Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Bayishim, Barakah Kodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Bayishim Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Raya with another video, and I'll be reading from two articles on the economiccollapseblog.com to further show how Yahweh Bayishim Yahushai is visiting the United States of America and you Americans in it for all your wickedness that you've been committing, especially you Edomites or so-called white people, and 2/3 of you Israelites or so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans who are hard-headed and refuse to return unto your power. We can clearly see that 2020 has been an action-packed year. It started off with that Iranian general getting assassinated by the U.S. Then this whole coronavirus pandemic came about, which further pushed the U.S. economy to total collapse and a Great Depression, as well as led to many job losses. You've had these protests erupting all across the country, and as we'll see from this first article, even more historic natural disasters are destroying farmers' croplands, which is going to further play into a coming famine, along with this engineered famine and food shortage that the elites are planning. Many of you Americans are about to die a grievous, horrific death. So to you sincere Akim out there, now more than ever, you shouldn't be getting weak in the truth. You should have all 10 toes down, pushing this word as hard as you possibly can to make your calling and election sure and have that protective hedge of Yahweh Bayishim Yahushai over you for when Jacob's trouble really pops off and these famines, race wars, civil wars, even more pestilences, and ultimately those nuclear missiles hit. But the title of the first article is Millions of Acres of Crops in the Central U.S. Have Been Destroyed by a Series of Historic Natural Disasters. While the mainstream media focuses on the upcoming election, COVID-19, and the endless protests going on in our major cities, another great tragedy is unfolding all across the middle of the country. A nightmarish drought, horrific flooding along the Mississippi River, and a giant derecho that just hit the farm belt have combined to make this one of the toughest years for farmers ever. And 2019 wasn't any better either. Last year, you had a historic flooding and storms ruining farmers' croplands and killing off a lot of their livestock. And this comes at a particularly bad time because the stress that the COVID-19 pandemic has put on food distribution systems has already created periodic shortages of certain items around the nation. We definitely could have used an uneventful growing season this year, and unfortunately, we didn't get it. On Monday, an absolutely massive derecho roared through the Midwest. According to USA Today, the storm had winds of up to 112 miles per hour. The storm had winds of up to 112 miles per hour near Cedar Rapids, Iowa, as powerful as an inland hurricane as it tore from eastern Nebraska across Iowa and parts of Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois, including Chicago and its suburbs. Most hurricanes don't have winds that high once they finally reach shore, and I have personally never experienced winds of such magnitude. Needless to say, this very unusual storm caused immense devastation. According to Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, approximately 10 million acres of crops were destroyed in Iowa alone. Early estimates say the derecho flattened at least 1/3 of Iowa's crops, about 10 million acres, according to Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. In addition, tens of millions of bushels of grain that were stored at co-ops and on farms were damaged or destroyed as bins blew away. And it rocked Marshalltown, Iowa, where an EF3 tornado destroyed the town's business district just 2 years ago. With winds of 99 miles per hour, Monday's storm damaged some businesses that had recently recovered, even damaging the scaffolding being used to repair the historic courthouse dome. I can't remember a storm ever causing this much damage in the middle of the summer. If about 10 million acres were flattened just in Iowa, how many more acres did this storm destroy in Nebraska, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois? Sadly, this one storm is going to completely financially ruin some farmers. And even before this happened, and those historic floods and storms last year happened, U.S. farmers were already on the ropes. You had record numbers of U.S. farmers filing for bankruptcy, as well as record numbers of U.S. farmers committing suicide. For example, Iowa farmer Tim Bardole is facing losses that could potentially exceed $1 million. Corn that used to stand upright on Bardole's farm is now laying on its side. Some stalks snapped off, others ripped out of the ground at the roots. Bardole estimates he'll be out $200 an acre, which is $500,000 total. Worst case scenario, that could go up to $500 per acre. That would equate to $1.25 million. How would you feel if you lost $1 million because of one storm? And you'd probably be looking at the barrel of a gun. This is 2 Ezra chapter 15. I'm going to read verse 12 to 13. Egypt shall mourn, and the foundation of it shall be smitten with the plague and punishment that the Most High shall bring upon it. The coronavirus pandemic, tens of millions of U.S. job losses, the U.S. economy inching closer and closer to another Great Depression and ultimately total collapse, the coming food shortages, wildfires in California, riots and protests breaking out all across the country, hurricanes, and this derecho, storms, flooding, and droughts. It's clear to see that Yahweh Ba'Yishim Yahushai is visiting this modern-day Egypt for its wickedness, because besides being known as Babylon the Great in the scriptures, the United States of America is also known as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, as pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8. And just like how the Most High punished ancient Egypt for afflicting the apple of his eye, the true children of Israel, who are again the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, he's afflicting this modern-day spiritual Egypt for the same. And it's going to be worse this time because ultimately the United States of America is going to be completely destroyed by 200 million nuclear missiles, which is going to turn it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards that's going to stand as a memorial as to what a wicked kingdom looks like and how not to govern the earth. Verse 13, they that till the ground shall mourn, and who are tillers of the ground, farmers, for their seeds shall fail through the blasting and hail, and with a fearful constellation, which is what we're seeing from all the information in that article, that derecho, storms, floodings, and drought have ruined many farmers' crops and croplands, and that's just this year. Last year, you had historic floods, storms, and snowstorms. And like I said earlier in the video, even before these natural events occurred, you had record numbers of farmers filing for bankruptcy and committing suicide. And it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse from here on out until those nuclear missiles hit. And real quick, before any smarty-arties say anything, like, oh, this is the elites using HAARP to destroy all these farmlands and bring about all these natural disasters. Even if that's the case, that's all through the will of Yahweh Ba'Yishim Yahushai. As it says in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1, the king's heart or his mind is in the hand of the Lord. He moveth it whithersoever he will. So if the elites are using any of their technology to cause all these events, ultimately it's through the will of Yahweh Ba'Yishim Yahushai to fulfill these prophecies. Further south, many farmers along the southern Mississippi Delta have already had their growing seasons wiped out by historic flooding for the second year in a row. The southern Mississippi Delta is home to some of the most fertile farmland in the United States, but not a single crop of soybeans, cotton, corn, or rice has been planted at many farms in the region, one of the poorest in the country. This wasn't supposed to happen. And those that till the ground shall mourn. The flooding of 2019 was a complete and utter nightmare, and this was the year when the recovery was supposed to begin. But instead, hundreds of thousands of acres are currently entirely buried by water. For the second year in a row, widespread flooding has left hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland underwater, ruining entire harvests. And now, with their fields submerged, farmers are bracing for another year of no income. Meanwhile, countless other farmers are having their growing seasons ruined by a crippling drought. I know that many of you are reading this article and are thinking that what I am saying sounds contradictory. After all, how can there be severe flooding and severe drought at the same time? Hey, with the Most High, anything is possible. I know that this sounds very strange, but it is actually happening. We are witnessing severe flooding right along the Mississippi River, and at the same time, historic drought conditions are creating massive problems across much of the western half of the nation. In fact, we are being told that drought conditions in some areas have already become the worst in almost a decade. Salakia. Drought conditions throughout the country are reaching their worst levels in almost a decade. This summer, drought has hit large portions of the United States, especially slamming key pasture and ranges for ranchers, but crops are also seeing downward trends in quality thanks to the hot, dry weather. Things are particularly bad in the Southwest, and this is making life very difficult for many ranchers. The worst hit section of the country, with the highest levels of drought, are in cattle country: West Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kansas. That's led to really damaged, dry topsoil and grazing land, which could force ranchers to invest in other feeding options for livestock. Only 36% of the country's pasture and range land is rated good or excellent. 30% is rated poor or very poor, reports Farm Futures. And during those historic floodings, storms, and snowstorms last year, you had some cattle farmers report that they lost up to 1 million heads of cattle. If you look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map, you will see that the drought is the worst in the areas where the original Dust Bowl developed back in the 1930s. Those that follow my work regularly know that I have been warning about a return of the Dust Bowl for many years, and now it is starting to happen. That's it with this article. But wait, there's more. Here's my second article titled 100,000 pasta boxes and enough peanut butter to make nearly 3 million sandwiches, and it came out on August 13th. And as we'll see from the information in this article, some government officials are preparing for an even more severe coming food shortage by stockpiling up on all these different food goods. And that, on top of those natural events that have destroyed a lot of farmers' crops and croplands, is only going to exacerbate the coming famines to the United States of America. And it's not just the U.S. that's going to experience famines. It's going to happen globally. You just had the UN Food Group come out with a report where they said that they expect over 300 million people to be on the verge of starvation by the end of 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. And like I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of these food shortages coming to the U.S. are manufactured by the elites to get the people even more desperate and open to accepting the New World Order and the mark of the beast, which is the RFID/NFC microchip implant. There will be goodies that come with the chip. Hey, we see that you don't have food or shelter. If you get this chip, you can get both for you and your loved ones. If everything is going to be just fine, why are officials spending millions of dollars to stockpile giant mountains of food? What has just been revealed about the new food warehouse in Washington state should be a major red flag for all of us. Most Americans seem to believe that the COVID-19 pandemic, the enormous economic problems that have erupted, and the nightmarish civil unrest that has been raging in our major cities are all just temporary phenomena, and that life will eventually get back to normal. Meanwhile, authorities in Washington state are acting as if what we have experienced so far is just the beginning. According to the Seattle Times, stockpiles of food are being stacked all the way to the roof in Washington state's new food warehouse. In Washington state's new food warehouse, there's enough Jif peanut butter to make nearly 3 million sandwiches. Barilla pasta boxes stretch to the ceiling, 100,000 in all. Large stacks of treetop applesauce, pancake mix, and canned green beans sit on pallets like soldiers waiting to be sent into duty. That seems like quite an odd thing to do if happy days are right around the corner. So what prompted authorities in Washington state to do this? Well, we are being told that the purpose is to ward off a shortage in the months ahead. After seeing food banks struggle to meet demand once the pandemic hit and the economy tanked, the Washington State Department of Agriculture began preparing to buy and stockpile tons of food to ward off a shortage in the months ahead. A shortage of food in the months ahead? That is quite a statement to make. In a previous article, I detailed that we are already witnessing periodic shortages of aluminum cans, soda, flour, canned goods, pasta, and rice. But what is happening in Washington makes it sound like they believe that what is ahead will be far, far more severe, which is exactly what it's going to be. Up to this point, Washington State has spent a total of $6.1 million on 4,000 pallets of food, but only about 1/4 of the orders that they have placed are already arrived. So why haven't the rest of the food arrived? Could it be possible that the other 49 states and the federal government are doing the exact same thing? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that question today. If anyone out there has any leads or intel that will help me to answer that question, please let me know. Meanwhile, we continue to see unprecedented lines at food banks all over the nation. On Tuesday, vehicles lined up for a mile to receive free food at a distribution event in Dallas. Thousands of people have lined up at a Texas food bank, with cars stretching for a mile as the state struggles with being the third worst affected by the coronavirus outbreak. Fair Park in Dallas County held its 4th food drive since the pandemic was declared in March, but the event on Tuesday was the first mega distribution that offered an option for several hundred walk-up clients without transportation. As I discuss in my new book, we were specifically warned in advance that this was coming, and it certainly appears that poverty is only going to continue to grow in the months ahead. One man that was interviewed by the local CBS affiliate said that his family would probably go hungry if it wasn't for food distribution events such as this. If it wasn't for this, we'd probably go hungry, shared Richard Archer. Archer says his daughter heard about the food giveaway on the news and sent him to get food. With unemployment benefits cut, her husband's been laid off for 3 months, so it's just been a struggle. If it wasn't for church and food giveaways, the kids would be hungry. So many families are deeply struggling out there right now, and they need our prayer. Food supplies are tight nationwide, and they are only going to get tighter. And this week, food production was hit by another substantial blow when an extremely powerful derecho roared through several important farming states in the middle of the country. That's pretty much just going into the information from the last article. But as you can see, everything's starting to get into the red, and sooner rather than later, it's going to be complete hell and chaos on the streets of the United States of America. If you think things are bad, just wait. You haven't seen nothing yet. Now I'm going to close it out in 2 Esdras chapter 16, verse 18 to 23. The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine, food shortages, the UN saying that they expect over 300 million people globally to be on the verge of starvation at the end of 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic, natural disasters destroying farmers' crops and croplands, and great death, tens to hundreds of millions of people dying. The beginning of wars, civil wars, race wars, World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, nuclear wars, and the powers shall stand in fear. The beginning of evils, what shall I do when these evils shall come? Pray that you're an Israelite of that elect number, so you can have that protective hedge of Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai over you. Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. But for all these things, they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges, And the brothers saw a lot of this during that first coronavirus lockdown. When that happened, a lot of brothers' family members and friends in the world came to him and started asking questions because they were scared. But when things started to lighten back up, a lot of them just went back to living their daily lives. Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushua is going to remember that you only came to him when things were bad. You didn't make an effort to come to him when things are good. So he's really going to drop the hammer on you when he opens up the floodgate to all this destruction. Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon the earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case. And even then shall evils grow upon the earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. And while you're starting to see price inflation creep in on certain goods across the country, things aren't completely dire yet. Things are still relatively affordable. Food's still relatively affordable. Gas is still relatively cheap. And you can go out and buy the creature comforts that you enjoy. But sooner rather than later, like a thief in the night, those massive price inflations are going to hit and things are going to become cripplingly unaffordable. And you're going to end up in line at those food banks, which, if you've read up on those food banks, you can see that they run out of food in the first couple of hours. And how much worse is that situation going to get with these crops that have been destroyed by these natural events, even more Americans losing their jobs, and the coming food shortage? And on top of all that, you've got countries across the planet talking about dropping the US dollar, which is only going to lessen the value and buying power of the dollar. And then you've got people talking about moving towards digital currencies and a cashless society, which is all just one step closer to the mark of the beast microchip implant. For many of them that dwell upon the earth shall perish of famine, and the other that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. So you Americans that may escape starving to death only have to look forward to getting caught up in these race wars, civil wars, a state of martial law, getting drafted to go fight over in the Middle East during World War III, or getting killed by that ultimate sword, the nuclear missiles. And the dead shall be cast out as dung, and there shall be no man to comfort them, for the earth shall be wasted, and the cities shall be cast down. There's going to be so much death, destruction, and dead bodies in that day that you're not going to give a second thought to those dead bodies like you don't give a second thought to that turd that you flushed down the toilet. But that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathens, chiefly Esau, Edom. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.